Stoned by her village as a witch, a Lakota chief carried her bleeding body home and gave her peace. I want to tell you about the morning I found her. Not because it changed everything, though it did, but because I have been carrying it a long time, and the weight of a thing carried alone starts to feel like shame, and it is not shame. It is the opposite of shame. It is the one right thing I did in a decade of wrong seasons, and I am old enough now that I want to say it plainly before I can't. It was the fourth morning of the moon of falling leaves. I know it was the fourth because I had been counting them, the way you count when you have no reason to count, when the days are just days and you are filling them so they don't fill you instead. I had been up before the sky cracked. I do that now. I didn't used to. When Yellow Crane was alive, I slept the way a man sleeps when something warm is beside him, all the way down into the dark. After she was gone, sleep became a thing I had to negotiate with, something I could get part of if I was quiet about it and didn't ask for too much. So I was outside, walking the ridge east of the camp. The grass was short and frost-stiff, and it made a sound under my feet like paper crumpling. The sky was that color it gets just before the light, not black, not gray, but a bruised kind of purple I have no word for in either language. I had my blanket around my shoulders. I was not thinking about anything, which was the point. Then I heard it. It wasn't screaming exactly. It was bigger than screaming. It was the sound a crowd makes when it has decided something, that low, steady roar that doesn't need a single voice because it is made of all of them together, all thinking the same thought at the same moment. I had heard it in battle. I had heard it at executions. I knew what it meant. I turned toward it. The Sihasapa camp was half a mile below me in the river bottom, hung Papa beyond them on the flat. What I saw when I crested the last rise was a ring of people, maybe 40, maybe more, and in the middle of the ring something I could not at first make sense of. A shape on the ground, moving and then not moving. I was running before I had decided to run. I will tell you what I was at that time, so you understand what it meant for me to run toward that sound. I was 53 years old. I had been headman of my band for 11 years. I had fought the Crow, the Shoshone, the Bluecoats twice. I had 11 horses and no living children and one dead wife, and I had started to feel that the main work of my life was finished, and what was left was the quiet part, the part where you wait without calling it waiting. I was a man who had learned to stay still. Men who have lost things often learn that. You stop moving fast toward anything because fast movement costs, and you are trying to conserve what you have left. But I ran. The people on the outside of the ring moved when I came through. Not because they were afraid of me, though some were. I was still head man and my name still carried, but because of how I was moving. When a man runs like the world is ending, he gets room. She was on the ground. Her face was a ruin. There is no gentle way to say that. One eye swollen shut, the other open and tracking me when I dropped to a knee beside her. That tracking was what told me she was still present, still inside it. Her mouth was bleeding and so was the side of her head, her right ear. One hand she had held up to shield herself. The stones were still on the ground around her. Small ones mostly. The size a hand can throw and throw again. I looked up at the ring of faces. Most of them I did not know Sihasapa, some agency hung Papa, a few of the mixed-blood men who had come in from the trading post at the bend. There were women in the ring too. I want you to know that. This was not only men. There were women standing there with their arms at their sides, watching, and some of them had been throwing. I said, "What has she done?" The silence that followed was the kind that means nothing, and everyone knows it, and no one will say it. A man near the front, barrel-chested, agency blanket, hair cut short, said she had spoken a sickness onto his boy. His boy had been sick 3 days. He said she had been seen at the river at night making signs over the water. I looked at her on the ground. She was maybe 30. Mixed blood, I could see that, her hair dark but with a wave in it, her skin lighter than mine. She had been wearing a dress that was Lakota-made, good hide with quill work on the yoke, and it was torn now. She had good boots, worn but well-stitched. These are the things you notice when you are a man who has had to assess damage. You catalog what is there, what is working, what can be saved. I picked her up. I did not ask permission. I did not explain myself. I stood up with her in my arms. She was not heavy. She had stopped fighting and gone limp the way a wounded thing goes limp to conserve, and I turned and walked back through the ring. No one stopped me. The barrel-chested man said something at my back, something about witch taint, about how I was bringing it into my lodge. I did not turn around. I have found in my life that when you do not turn around, the words behind you get smaller, and if you keep walking, they get small enough to step over. My camp was the length of a good rifle shot from that ring of people. My lodge was the second from the south side, the one with the old medicine bundle hanging left of the door. There was a fire inside. I had banked it before I went walking, not expecting to come back to it like this. I put her down on the robes near the fire. My hands were shaking a little. I want to tell the truth about that, not from fear, from something that takes a man in the place behind his ribs when he has seen a thing done to a person that should not be done to a person, something that sits between rage and grief and doesn't have a name. I got water. I had a good clay pot and I heated it slow. I found the medicine bundle my wife had made. Yellow Crane had been a better healer than I ever was, and she had left her medicines when she left everything else, and I had kept them not because I knew how to use them well, but because throwing them away was not something I could do. I did the best I knew how. She watched me the whole time. That open eye tracking. When I pressed a wet cloth to her face, she winced but didn't make a sound. When I cleaned the cut above her ear, she closed her eye just for a moment, then opened it again. After a while, she tried to say something. I told her not to, not yet. I worked for a long time. The fire settled and I put more wood on it. By the time I had done what I could do, the sky outside was full light, the frost gone off the grass, the camp noise ordinary again, horses moving, someone chopping wood to the north, a child running and then scolded. As if nothing had happened in the river bottom, as if there was no woman in my lodge. She said, "You don't know me." Her Lakota was good, clean, she'd grown up in it. I said no. She said, "Then why?" I didn't have a good answer for that. I told her the truth, which was that I had seen enough of that kind of thing and I was tired of it. That wasn't all of the truth, but it was the part I could give to a stranger. She told me her name was Ampa Waste Win, Morning Light Woman. Her mother had been Miniconju, her father a French trader who had gone back east when she was 4. She had lived with her mother's people most of her life, had gone to the agency school for 3 winters, had come back. She had a reputation, she said, without bitterness, just the flat fact of it, for knowing things, knowing what plants would bring fever down, knowing when a birth was going to go wrong and what to do about it. She had delivered 11 babies and all 11 lived. She had lost one mother 3 years back and she still thought about that one. She said it the way I would have said it. I said, "The boy who is sick, what does he have?" She looked at me for a long time. Then she described it, the kind of cough that turns wet, the fever that peaks at night and breaks toward morning, the way his throat would be. She said there was a route downriver, she knew where. I said, "You need to rest first." She said, "The boy is small. He may not have the 3 days it takes me to stand up." I looked at her. The eye that was open was dark brown and steady, and had in it something I had not seen directed at me in a long time, not deference, not fear, not the careful flattery people give to men withstanding, just plain level attention. She was looking at me the way you look at a man you are deciding whether to trust, not the way people look at chiefs, the way they look at men. I said, "Tell me where the route is." She told me. It took a while and she was precise about it. Bend in the river, 2 willows close together, a limestone shelf above the water, the plant that grows in the crack between the shelf and the bank, Looks like sage but doesn't smell like it. You want the root, not the leaf. You want the length of your middle finger, not more. I went and found it. It took me most of the morning. I came back with 4 of them, which was 3 more than she'd asked for, and when I came through the door and held them up, she looked at them for a moment and then she started to cry. Not loud, not the way people cry when they want to be seen crying. Quiet, the way a thing leaks when the pressure's been too long on it. She turned her face a little, and I turned away and gave her what time she needed, which is all a man can really do with a thing like that. She prepared the medicine herself, sitting up, moving carefully. I watched her hands. She had a way of working, deliberate, no motion wasted, that reminded me of men I had respected. She said, "Take this to the boy's mother. Tell her 3 times a day, a small cup, not too hot. Tell her to keep the lodge warm but not hot. Tell her to stay with him through the night fevers." I said, "She may not take it from me when she knows where it came from." Ampao looked at me. She said, "She will take it from you." She was right. I went to the Sihasapa camp and I found the boy's mother, and I stood in the door of her lodge with the medicine in my hands, and I told her what she needed to do. The woman's husband came out, not the barrel-chested one who had thrown rocks, another man, quieter, and he looked at me and then at what I was holding and he said, "Is this from the witch woman?" I said, "It is from a healer who knows what your son has and how to break it." He was quiet a long time, then he stepped back from the door. The boy broke his fever on the 2nd day. I know because his mother came to my lodge and stood outside and called my name, and when I came out she was holding a small basket with 3 duck eggs in it. She didn't say anything. She set it at my feet and walked away. That was enough. Ampao was on her feet by then, moving slow but moving. I had given her my wife's old dress while hers dried. It was too big on her, and she'd tied it with a length of rawhide, and she looked like someone who had been through a flood and was starting to find the funny parts of it. She had a small silver cross on a cord around her neck, the only thing that was purely her father's, and she kept touching it when she thought about something, not prayer exactly, more like a habit of the hand. She said she needed to go. I asked where. She said she had no people now. The Miniconju camp to the west had taken her in the previous summer, but they had moved on when the grass played out, and she hadn't followed, and now. She stopped, made a small gesture with her hand, the way you wave off something you don't want to look at directly. I said, "Stay." She looked at me. I said, "Not for me. Not for that. But it is late in the season and you are hurt and you have no horse, and this country is not kind to a woman alone in the cold months." She said, "I am not charity." I said, "I know. I saw what you do with a root and a clay pot. This camp has 43 people and no healer since last spring. That is not charity. That is a hole you could fill." She looked at me for a long time, long enough that I looked away, which I do not generally do. Then she said, "I will stay through the cold months. We will see what comes after." I said, "That is all I am asking." What came after was not something I planned for. I want to be clear about that. I am not a romantic man. I am not a man who thought he would find a second thing in his life after Yellow Crane. I had made my peace with the shape of what was left, and it was a dignified shape if a quiet one. I had my standing, my horses, my responsibilities, my small habits of mourning. I was not looking for anything. But a man who lives alone and then suddenly does not live alone, the change is not subtle. She moved through that lodge like she knew every corner of it, quietly, without fuss. She had opinions about how the fire should be laid. She was wrong. But she was interesting about being wrong. And we argued about it for about 3 weeks until she finally admitted that my way was warmer, which she did without apology, and with the faint suggestion that she had simply been waiting for the proof. She took over the cooking, which I had been managing in a grim and joyless way. And the first time she made proper wasna, I ate too much of it and felt like a man who had been eating dust for 3 years and had forgotten what food was. She had a garden sense even in cold months. She knew what grew where along the river bottom, could find things under light snow that I would have walked past, and she traded her medicines through the winter to anyone who needed them without distinguishing between people who had thrown rocks and people who hadn't, which I asked her about once. She said, holding that account will use up everything I have. I don't have it to spare. I thought about that for a long time. The barrel-chested man's wife had a bad berth in the moon of strong cold. He came to my lodge himself. He stood at the door. He did not come in, and he held the door flap with both hands and looked at the ground and said he needed the healer woman. I stepped back from the door and didn't say anything. He came in. He stood in my lodge and he looked at Ampao and he said, "My wife, please." She was already putting on her coat. She was gone for 2 days. The birth was hard. The child lived. The mother lived. She came back in the early morning of the 3rd day with dried blood on her sleeves and sat down by the fire and didn't move for a long time. I made tea. I set it beside her and went to the other side of the lodge and did not ask her anything. After a while she picked up the tea. After a while longer she said, "Thank you for not asking." I said I thought about asking. She made a sound that was the beginning of a laugh. There were people in the camp who talked. There are always people who talk. An older woman, Crow Feather's wife, told anyone who would listen that the mixed blood witch had worked her medicine on me, that she had turned the head of a sober man with something in the food or the fire. I heard it and I did not engage with it. I have found in my life that a man standing is either strong enough to hold the weight of talk or it is not, and if it is not, then talking back will not repair it. I went about my business. I did what I had always done. The work of a headman is mostly small, someone's horse missing, someone's family without enough meat going into cold months, a young man with a temper that's going to get him hurt, a debt between 2 families that is starting to harden. I dealt with those things the way I always had. But now when I came back to the lodge, there was light in it. That sounds like a simple thing. It is not a simple thing. When you have come back to a dark lodge for years, and then you come back and there is light and warmth and the smell of food and the sound of someone moving, that small thing is so large it takes the breath out of you the first few times, and you have to stand in the door for a moment before you can speak. She noticed this. She did not say anything about it, which was the right call. We went on like that through the cold months and into the first warm ones. She learned which things I didn't want to talk about, and I learned which things she didn't want to talk about, and we left those things alone and talked about everything else. She had strong views about the agency system and the treaty provisions, and she was not wrong about any of it. She knew more history than I expected. She had read at the agency school, actually read, worked through it, and she would sometimes come out with a fact about something that had happened a long time ago, something I only half knew, and lay it out so clearly that it changed the shape of the thing for me. I started looking forward to evenings in a way I had not looked forward to evenings in years. This is the part I want to say carefully, because I am going to be honest about it, and I don't want it to sound like more than it was or less than it was. One evening in the moon of green grass, we were sitting outside the lodge, late, the sky full of stars, the camp quiet. She had been quiet for a long time. Her quiet was not uneasy. It was just the comfortable kind, the kind you share with someone when you have used up the words for the day and don't need any more. I was looking at the ridgeline. I was thinking about something. I don't remember what, some small practical thing. She said, "I think you are a good man." I didn't say anything. She said, "Not a lucky man, not an easy man, but a good one. I thought you should know that someone has noticed." I was quiet for a while. Then I said, "It has been a while since anyone said that." She said, "I know." She turned her head and looked at me then. Not the way you look at a chief or a protector or a useful thing. The way you look at a person you have decided belongs in your life. I have tried to describe it and I keep failing, so I will just say, I did not look away. After a while she put her hand on the back of my hand. She did not grip it or cover it, just set it there, the way you set a thing down carefully when it matters. Her hands were rough from work, healer's hands, always working. I had noticed that. The roughness of her hand on mine was one of the most real things I had felt in years. We sat like that until the fire burned low. I am going to skip ahead now, because what came after was quiet and good, and I don't know how to tell it without making it into something it wasn't. We were married in the summer and the ceremony was small, and Crow Feather and his wife came, and Crow Feather's wife brought food and kept her opinions to herself for the first time in memory, and the young men of my band were there, the ones I had been mentoring for years, and they were glad. I could see it. They were genuinely glad, not polite about it, and that meant something to me. She did not stop being who she was after we were married. I want to say that because it matters. She was not softened or diminished or tucked away. She still went where she was needed, sometimes in the night, sometimes in weather. She still argued about the fire. She still had opinions. When a delegation from the agency came through the following spring, she sat beside me in council and said things that I had been thinking and had not known how to say. And she said them clearly and without anger. And two of the agency men went away looking like they had been educated about something they had not expected to be educated about. I was proud of her. I am still proud of her. It surprises me every time, the particular kind of pride I mean, not the pride of owning a thing, but the pride of standing next to something that is better than you and being trusted to stand there. There is one more piece I want to tell. The following winter, the boy who had been sick, the barrel-chested man's son, he was 4 years old by then, sturdy, loud. He fell through the ice at the river bend during a thaw and we got him out fast, but it scared everyone badly. Ampa worked on him for a long time that night, not just the body, talking to him, her voice low and steady. She knew the names children need to be called when they are frightened. She knew how to say, "You are here, you are safe, the cold is gone, look, I am right here." I stood in the door of that lodge and listened to her voice, and the child stopped shaking and his breathing smoothed out and he slept. The barrel-chested man was across the fire from her. He had not said anything to either of us since the day he came asking for help, had not thanked her, had not undone what he'd done. He was watching her work and his face was doing something complicated. When it was over and the boy was sleeping, he stood up. He was a large man and he stood like a large man who does not know what to do with himself. He said her name. He said Ampao Waste Win. She looked at him. He said, "I did not know what I was doing. I know that isn't enough." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "No, but it's a start." He nodded, he walked out. She sat there for a moment and then she picked up her things and came to the door. When she saw me standing there, she stopped. She looked at me and her face did that thing I had learned to read, not quite a smile, not quite relief, just a settling, the way a thing settles when it has found its place. I held the door flap for her. We walked back to our lodge together. The night was cold and clear, the kind of clear you only get after the worst of winter has passed, the stars low and very bright. Our breath made small clouds. The camp was asleep. I could see our lodge from a distance, the coals giving off a faint red through the hide, just enough to navigate by, and I thought about how it had looked 4 years ago, dark, quiet, a man's lodge with no reason to hurry back to it. She took my arm. Not for warmth, not from weakness. She walked the way she always walked, straight, sure, but she took my arm and held it, and we walked the rest of the way like that. Two people who had been through the cold months together and knew what the other one was made of. I do not have grand words for what the rest of it has been. I would not trust grand words about a thing this plain and solid. I will say this. I am an old man now and I have my horses and my responsibilities and the young men I have tried to shape, and I have a woman beside me who sees me, not the head man, not the standing, but me, the underneath of me. The part that was walking the frost-stiff grass alone before the sun came up because sleep wouldn't come, and she chose that, chose him, chose to stay. A man does not take that for granted. A man carries it carefully, the way you carry something that cost everything it cost to get, and he does not set it down, and he does not forget what the morning looked like before he went running toward that sound. I am glad I ran. I would run it again.